He was out of sight for 3 minutes. 3. A 6-year-old boy on a summer hike with his family was playing a simple game. He and the other children were going to circle around through the brush and jump out to surprise the grown-ups. A bit of harmless fun on a Father's Day weekend in the mountains. The boys split up. Dennis went one way around a clump of bushes, just out of view. When the others came around the other side to spring their little ambush, Dennis wasn't there. In the few minutes he had been out of sight, in good weather, on a popular trail, surrounded by his own family, 6-year-old Dennis Martin had simply vanished. What followed was one of the largest search operations in the history of the American national parks. Thousands of people, soldiers, helicopters, the FBI. They combed those mountains for weeks, and in it all, across all that ground, they never found a single trace of him. Not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing, not a bone, nothing. His name was Dennis Lloyd Martin. He disappeared in 1969 in the Great Smoky Mountains. And more than 50 years later, no one has ever been able to explain how a little boy could step behind a bush in front of his family and never be seen again. This is the disappearance of Dennis Martin.
Let me set it up properly. It was June of 1969, Father's Day weekend. And for the Martin family of Knoxville, Tennessee, that meant something specific, an annual tradition. Every year, they would head up into the Great Smoky Mountains for a camping and hiking trip. 3 generations of them. On this trip, it was young Dennis, his older brother, their father, Bill, and their grandfather, Clyde. This was not a family of careless tourists. They knew these mountains. They came every year. They understood the terrain. The grandfather was an experienced outdoorsman. This was their place, a familiar ritual in a familiar landscape. Their destination was an area called Spence Field, a high, open, grassy clearing, a bald on the ridgeline, the kind of beautiful, sweeping spot that draws hikers up into the Smokies. It sits along the high country near the Appalachian Trail. At Spence Field, the Martins crossed paths with another family, the Keys, who were also out hiking. And as families do, the children fell in together. Dennis, his brother, and a couple of the Key boys started playing, the way kids do the moment they find other kids in the wild, running, exploring, laughing in that big open meadow under the summer sky. It was, by every measure, an ordinary, happy afternoon, the last ordinary afternoon that family would ever have.
Here is exactly what happened, as closely as it can ever be known. The children came up with a plan, a classic kids' prank. They would split into 2 groups, sneak off in different directions through the edge of the woods and the brush around the clearing, circle around and then leap out to startle the adults who were sitting and talking nearby. It was nothing. It was the kind of game children play 1,000 times. The whole point was that they'd only be apart for a moment. So they split. The other boys went one way, and little Dennis, who was wearing a bright red shirt, went the other, by himself, ducking around a line of bushes at the edge of the trees to come at the grown-ups from the opposite side. That was it. That was the last anyone saw of him. When the other children popped out to surprise the adults and the moment came for Dennis to appear too, he didn't. At first, no alarm. He was a kid, hidden in some brush, maybe taking his time. His father called out to him. Nothing. He called again. Still nothing.
And in the space of just a few minutes, that ordinary lack of an answer curdled into something cold. Because Dennis wasn't hiding. He wasn't around the next bush. He wasn't anywhere. In the brief window he'd been out of sight, in clear weather, yards from his own father, he was already gone.
Bill Martin, Dennis's father, did what any parent would do. He moved instantly. He searched the immediate area, calling his son's name, his voice climbing with that particular panic that every parent knows in their bones. He checked the bushes, the tree line, the folds of the clearing. Within minutes, he understood that this was not a child playing a trick that had gone on too long. Something was wrong. And here is a detail that mattered enormously and tragically. Bill, in his fear, in his desperate need to find his boy fast, began searching widely and quickly himself and called for help, and others joined, which is exactly what instinct demands. But in those first crucial hours, all that frantic, well-meaning movement across the area, the footsteps, the trampling, the searching in the rain that was coming, would end up disturbing the very ground that might have held the answer. The tracks, the scent, the small signs a trained tracker might have read. Word got out. The park rangers were alerted, and what began as one terrified father calling his son's name in a mountain meadow started to grow, hour by hour, into something enormous. Because as the first day bled into night, the weather turned, and the mountains, which had been so beautiful that afternoon, became something else entirely. The search for Dennis Martin became one of the biggest the country had ever seen for a missing person in the wilderness. It started with rangers and family. It grew to local volunteers, and then it exploded. At its height, the operation reportedly involved well over 1,000 people on the ground at a time. The military got involved. Green Berets, soldiers trained for exactly this kind of rugged terrain, were brought in to grid search the mountains. Helicopters swept the ridgelines and valleys from above. The FBI took an interest. Tracking dogs were deployed. Electronic equipment, manpower, expertise, everything a nation could throw at finding one small boy was thrown at those mountains. They searched for weeks. They covered an enormous area of brutal, steep, densely forested terrain. They went over the ground around Spence Field again and again, and then pushed out for miles in every direction. And they found nothing. Think about what that means. A 6-year-old on foot who vanished from a fixed point. There are limits to how far a small child can travel through that kind of country. Searchers know the math. They search outward in expanding rings based on how far a child that age could plausibly go. Dennis should have been found inside that circle. He should have been found, alive or not, within the reach of that search. He wasn't. And the reason the trail went so completely cold may have come down to the sky.
Because not long after Dennis vanished, the rain came, and it did not stop. Heavy rain moved into the Smokies and settled in for days. We're talking about serious mountain rainfall, the kind that turns trickling streams into rushing creeks, that fills ravines with fast water, that washes the land clean. For the search, it was a disaster. Rain destroys scent trails, the very thing tracking dogs rely on. It erases footprints. It erases the small disturbed signs, a broken branch, a scuff in the dirt, that a tracker reads like words on a page. Whatever faint trail Dennis Martin may have left in those first minutes and hours was, in all likelihood, washed off the face of the mountain by that rain before anyone with the skill to follow it ever got the chance. And it raises a grim possibility about the boy himself. A small child, alone, lost, soaked, in falling temperatures and rising water, in steep terrain. The wilderness is merciless to the unprepared, and a 6-year-old in a storm is as unprepared as it gets. Quick word before we go on. If these wilderness cases grip you the way they grip me, please subscribe. This channel lives on them, the cases that were closed but never solved. And there's a new one every week. Now, there is one more piece to this, a strange, unsettling report from that same day that has fueled a very different theory for over 50 years.
It comes from the other family, the Keys. On the same day Dennis vanished, members of the Key family were in the mountains some miles away from Spence Field. And by their account, around the relevant time, they experienced something that disturbed them deeply. They reported hearing a sound, an enormous, sickening scream carrying through the woods, the kind of sound that stops you cold. And one of them, the father, reported seeing a man, a rough-looking man, moving through the brush, off the trail, in an area where no one should really have been. And by the account, this man appeared to be carrying something over his shoulder, something he was hauling away through the trees. At the time, in the chaos of that massive search, this report was not fully chased down. It got somewhat lost in the noise. But in the decades since, it has become the cornerstone of the darker theory in this case. The idea that Dennis Martin was not lost to the mountain at all, that he was taken, carried off by a stranger. That scream and that figure being the last terrible trace of it. I want to be careful and honest here. This was a reported sighting of a man who was never identified in the confusion of one of the largest searches in history. It was never confirmed to be connected to Dennis at all. It may have been a moonshiner, a hermit, a hunter, someone with nothing to do with the boy, hauling who knows what. But it is real, it was reported, and it has never been explained. And once you've heard it, it is very hard to forget.
So, why was Dennis Martin never found? Step back, and the reasons line up into the same kind of perfect tragic storm we see in the worst of these cases. Start with the speed of it. He vanished in minutes from a fixed point, which means there was no trail to begin from, no last seen location to work outward from except a patch of brush. Add the contamination. In those first frantic hours, the well-meaning rush of the family and early searchers across the ground likely destroyed the subtle signs a tracker needed. The scene was trampled before it could be read. Add the rain. Days of heavy mountain rainfall that washed away scent, tracks, and evidence, and that turned the terrain itself into a more dangerous water-filled place. Add the terrain. The Great Smoky Mountains are vast, steep, and unforgiving, thick with brush and laced with ravines and fast creeks. A place that can hide a small body just yards from a searcher and never give it up. And if you believe the Keys, the terrible possibility of a human hand, a stranger who carried the answer out of those mountains before the search even understood what it was looking for. Put it together, and you have a case that, despite the largest search imaginable, ended with absolutely nothing.
No Dennis, no trace, just a mountain that closed over a little boy and never spoke of him again. So, what really happened to Dennis Martin? Let me give you the honest shape of the theories. The most conventional, and probably the most likely, is the hardest to say. That Dennis, in those first minutes, wandered just far enough in the wrong direction, got turned around, and became truly lost. That as the rain and cold came, a small child alone in that terrain simply did not survive. And that his remains came to rest somewhere, in a ravine, under brush, in a creek, that the search, for all its size, never reached. It is the simplest answer, and the mountains have swallowed grown, experienced hikers this way. A 6-year-old would stand no chance. The second is abduction, the Keys account. The scream, the rough man carrying something, has kept alive the possibility that a stranger took Dennis. It can't be proven, it can't be dismissed. And the third is the bucket this case is most famous for, the unexplained. Dennis Martin is one of the foundational cases in the world of national park disappearances, the kind of vanishing that gets filed under the genuinely inexplicable. How a child disappears from a fixed point, in minutes, in front of family, and leaves no trace at all. Every theory leaves a hole. The mountain explanation can't explain the total absence of remains. The abduction theory rests on an unconfirmed sighting, and the unexplained, by definition, explains nothing. The truth is, we do not know, and those mountains have kept their answer for over half a century.
I want to bring it back to the family, because their grief is the realest thing in this whole story. Imagine being Bill Martin. You take your sons up to the mountains, the way your family always has, on a beautiful Father's Day weekend. You're sitting in a sunlit meadow, listening to your kids laugh and play a harmless game, and in the space of 3 minutes, your youngest boy is gone. Not in a crash you could see, not in a current you could point to. Just gone. Erased from a clearing he was standing in seconds before. And then you live the rest of your life inside that. You watch 1,000 people search those mountains and come back with nothing. You go home without your child, and without even the small, terrible mercy of knowing what happened to him. No grave to visit, no answer to hold. Just a red shirt, disappearing behind a bush, replaying in your mind for the rest of your days. That is what these cases really are, underneath the mystery and the theories and the missing 411 of it all. A family that went up a mountain whole and came down broken and never got to know why. Dennis Martin was 6 years old. He liked to play with his brother. And one summer afternoon he stepped behind a bush and the mountain took him and never gave him back. So I'll leave it with you, the way I always do. What do you believe happened to Dennis Martin? Did the mountain itself take him? Lost in the rain, in country too rough to give him up? Or was it the man in the brush, carrying something over his shoulder that the Keys swore they saw? Or is this simply one of those vanishings that has no answer at all? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And on this one, I really want to know where you land, because experienced searchers, investigators, and families have wrestled with it for over 50 years and never agreed. I'm Gravenfield. The cases that were closed
but never solved. If you made it this far, you understand exactly what this channel is. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there. And if you've got little ones, keep them close in the wild places. The mountains are beautiful, but they do not always give back what they take.